anyone that's a scientist.
I had to stop on that. I was like, that just didn't make any sense to anybody. Anybody who's an actual scientist are like, what the fuck are the NFL scientists saying? Oh my
Dr.
God.
Robert Cantu edited the journal's Sports Medicine
crass,
section.
Hubris.
The papers were published despite his objections.
The papers.
He's like, no, I don't think you should publish these. And they're like, fuck you, we're going to do it anyway.
Started to make statements about multiple head injuries were not a problem in the NFL. If they went back into the same contest with a concussion, it didn't matter.
Well.
If they got knocked out and went back into the same contest, it didn't matter. And there were no long-term psychological problems or cognitive problems in these athletes. In essence, saying it wasn't a problem.
I'm not saying just sit
Dr.
there.
Cantu says he took his concerns
and
to
get
the
fat.
journal's editor-in-chief, Dr. Michael Apuzzo. Apuzzo
Don't-
was also
don't
a
move or you will
consultant for
die.
the New York Giants.
I said that I really think this data is flawed. I really think it shouldn't be published. He's the one that made the decision to publish papers, no matter whether the reviewers felt they should be published.
If you
or
move,
not.
if you
no matter whether the section editor
don't move,
felt
you
they
will
should be
die.
Published or not.
Mark Lovell
you need to
was
move
a member
around.
of the committee and an author
Just
on
don't
some of the
slam your
studies.
head into something.
He now admits there were problems with the research.
I look back on some of the papers. Yeah, I think I could have done it differently. I think the fault of the paper was it was maybe too early to be making those statements.
No shit, you hadn't done a single study on this stuff regarding. They made a conclusion that there's no damage to kids who are playing football. Not even a single iota of research on that, and they made the conclusion. So maybe you think it was premature to post that? Yeah.
Based on a fairly small sample of players, which is the major criticism of the study, which I think is a valid one.
He has to now. Look at how uncomfortable he is. He has to now because this is made after he lost a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, $2 billion.
The NFL committee published 16 papers. Neither Dr. Apuzzo, Dr. Pellman, nor Commissioner Tagliabue would speak to Frontline about the papers.
Of course they're not.
But in those articles, the league had issued its...
Okay, what do I have to tell you about this? Do we have to say, if a scientist who publishes a paper in a public scientific journal will not talk to a journalist about their findings, that's sus. That's sus as fuck. It's totally sus as fuck. If you're not willing to stand behind the paper that you published in a scientific journal and actually answer the allegations against it, you're basically just admitting guilt 100%.
Definitive denials.
The closer you look, the less this holds up. But it did establish, this kind of impressive-looking set of findings, which pushed off the day of reckoning for the league. That's really what is happening here.
Yeah, they just want to get their work. That's what I'm trying to say. So if a scientist gets their work in a public paper and a journalist says, "Hey, let's have you talk about it," even if the journalist is going to say, "We're going to challenge you on your findings," they're like, "Okay, yeah, I'm game to stand by my findings." But if they know that their study was a fucking farce from the beginning, or that they made a well-intended study that was a piece of shit, which they've realized later, do not, deny. We just have to kind of move on. Let's pretend it never happened, right? Because they can't say that study that we did was bullshit. Because too much is writing on it.
Right?
Their reputation, everything else.
This whole run of research.
But they have no problem destroying other people's reputations, as we're going to see here.
It's being published. The day of reckoning, where the league has to answer to somebody about what it's doing about concussions, just keeps getting pushed off and pushed off and pushed off.
This is the part that makes me the angriest.
In Pittsburgh, at just about this time, Mike Webster's brain tissue was being examined.
This poor
Dr.
guy.
Bennett Omalu was studying the microscopic
This guy's
samples.
career was destroyed.
I put the slides in.
Absolutely destroyed.
Whoa!
He did not even know what he was getting into.
Mike Webster's slides.
He never even heard of football.
I looked again. I saw
He's a
changes
total nerd.
that shouldn't be in a 50-year-old man's brain, and also changes that shouldn't be in a brain that look normal.
He's the one who kicked off this whole problem.
He saw collections of tau protein, collections which shouldn't be there in someone.
And he had no idea what
Webster's
football was. He had no idea who Mike Webster was. He had no vested interest in taking down NFL. He's just a really obsessed brain nerd scientist.
And this is what jumped out at him as he looked at it.
And then they destroyed his career. They destroyed his family, his career, and everything.
He saw physical evidence.
And he was like, "What the hell? Why is everybody coming after me?
On the brain.
Why aren't they happy I'm finding this stuff out?"
After I looked at it over and over and over and over,
It's just so sad.
This was something.
It was a disease never previously.
Is there a reason to watch the Super Bowl Sunday? The same reason that the committee that found all of these things held a press conference across from Super Bowl Sunday.
In football players.
Yeah.
Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE.
Yeah.
Chronic traumatic encephalopathy is a disease, a progressive neurodegenerative disease, where the end stage leaves tau protein deposition in distinctive areas of the brain, in distinctive locations that separate this disease from any other, like Alzheimer's or some other dementia.
For some reason, the repetitive brain trauma starts this cascade of events in the brain that changes the way this tau looks and behaves. It goes awry, and it starts destroying the integrity of the brain cells.
The tau is effectively closing in around the brain cells and choking them, and it's impacting the way the brain is working and ultimately erupting in issues around memory, agitation, anger.
Omalu shared his evidence with leading brain researchers who confirmed his findings. Then he submitted a scientific paper on the Webster case to the one journal that seemed to be most interested in head injuries in football, Neurosurgery. And Dr. Raposo accepted it.
He got
was a junior pathologist in the Allegheny County Coroner's Office, but the people he published with were one of the leading Alzheimer's disease experts in the country, one of the leading neuropathologists in the country, one of the most well-known coroners in the country.
It was the first hard evidence that playing football could cause permanent brain damage.
Certainly we knew that if you got hit on the head so many times, maybe you had a 20% chance of having dementia pugilistica if you were a former professional boxer. But we didn't really relate that in a modern sport like football, in a helmeted sport, that it could lead to that. And that was the big discovery, I think.
Dr. Omalu believed the National Football League would want to know about his discovery.
That was what I thought in my
mind. Yeah, I'm a scientist and I found something out, and maybe you want to know what I have to find. It proceeds to have his entire family destroyed.
State of mind. But unfortunately, I was...
He talks... Okay, I'm going to spoil this because at the end of the thing, he starts talking about the same thing and he's in tears.
I was proving wrong, that it wasn't meant to be that way.
He's trying to be so nice about it, but they fucking destroyed his family.
In a letter to the journal Neurosurgery, Dr. Pellman and other members of the NFL's MTBI committee attacked Dr. Omalu's paper.
The rheumatologists attacked the geeky brain surgeon who didn't even know who Mike Webster was and never watched a football game in his life. The rheumatologists who got all their papers published in this thing saying there's no connection, with no fucking study whatsoever related to their conclusions regarding young people in football, even though they made a conclusion that said there's no damage. And that guy who did the study just admitted on camera that we probably should have done some studies there before we made that conclusion. It was premature. Those are his exact words. Those people came out in the study and they destroyed this scientist.
These statements are based on a complete misunderstanding of the relevant medical literature.
I can't talk about this. I'm going to get so angry.
Mike Webster was suffering from neurological problems.
There is inadequate clinical evidence that the subject had a chronic neurological condition.
The league officials, the doctors and scientists serving on the MTBI committee, not only disputed those findings, they went after Dr. Omalu with a vengeance. They publicly said he should retract his findings.
The NFL doctors insisted Dr. Omalu was misunderstanding the science of brain injury.
We therefore urge the authors to retract their paper.
Yeah, because it's costing us too much fucking money and we might get sued.
Ordinary move under any circumstances. Like, you don't try to get a paper retracted unless there's evidence of fraud or plagiarism or something like that.
Omalu et al.'s description of chronic traumatic encephalopathy is completely wrong.
They went after him with missiles. I mean, like a nuclear missile strike on a guy's reputation. They basically told him to go away and never come back. And that was just for starters.
God, I can't. This is one of those documentaries I watch. I'm getting vomitous. I can't watch this. It just makes me so filled with rage, and there's nothing I can do about it except for tweet about it and watch this on Super Bowl Sunday.
In the end, Dr. Omalu's paper was not retracted. And now Omalu had another case.
Terry Long killed himself by drinking antifreeze.
A second Steeler had died.
Terry Long
committed suicide
by drinking antifreeze.
Terry Long was young.
And Dr. Omalu received his brain.
Which is one of the problems with encephalopathy.
And everybody there said, "Hey, we have another case for you."
They tried to hit someone ahead to make a study in the lab.
What are you talking about? I said, "Oh, Terry Long."
No, but they did bring in wrestling.
I'm like, who's Terry Long?
They brought in wrestlers. Wrestlers have the same problem.
NFL player, he died.
Those professional wrestlers, they have
Long
the
was
same
an
problem.
offensive lineman with the Steelers for 8 years. He battled in the pit alongside Mike Webster.
He, like Webster, his life had sort of fallen apart in a lot of ways. He had issues certainly during his career.
He was a steroid user. He had been involved.
See, this is what it makes me sick, and we haven't heard about it yet, but the NFL eventually turns on their own superstars and says, well, it's not our problem he had a steroid abuse. It's not our problem he was addicted. It's not our problem he was suicidal. It's not our problem. But guess what? All of those behaviors are classic encephalopathy symptoms.
And some serious financial problems.
And so ultimately, he committed suicide by drinking antifreeze.
As he had for Webster, Dr. Omalu sectioned part of Long's brain and again had it stained.
He ran the same test, same stains, found the same splotches. CTE in this brain too. Now, 2 former Steelers who had gone crazy about the same time.
When I saw Terry Long's case,
it's not like the Alzheimer's that Muhammad Ali had, right? Boxers, we know their brains get destroyed. We've known that for a long time. But their brains get so destroyed that they don't get CTE as much as they get the other shit, like just straight up like brains just stop working. I mean, like really stop working. Muhammad Ali is a really sad case of that, right?
I became more convinced that this was not just an anomaly, a statistical anomaly.
The difference between this and the stuff that goes down with the boxers, and they don't talk about it in the documentary, is the boxers have more serious traumatic brain damage. That's not this sort of insidious creep in microtrauma over time stuff that happens with lots of tiny hits with the ETC.
Omalu submitted another paper to neurosurgery. This one about Terry Long.
That caused the MTBI committee to say this is preposterous. This is not good science. This is still not something that we're buying into.
If you read Pelman made statements like what I practice is not medicine, it's not science. They insinuated I was not practicing medicine, I was practicing voodoo.
Voodoo? They actually said the word voodoo? You pieces of shit. Voodoo. Racist pieces of shit.
The NFL would not publicly sit down with Dr. Omalu, but one night, in a private meeting, he brought his CTE slides and finally...
I told you, I have such a hard time watching this. I'm getting so pissed off.
Met face-to-face with one of the NFL's doctors.
And the NFL doctor at some point said to me, Bennett, do you know the implications of what you're doing?
Yeah, I do. I want to save people's lives. I don't give a shit about the sport because I don't even know what it is. Why are you judging me for that?
So I looked, he was on my left. I said, yeah, I think I do. He said, no, you don't. So we continued talking. At some point, he interrupted me again. Bennett, do you think you know the implications of what you're doing? I said, I think I do. I don't know. He said, no, you don't. So we continued talking again. Then the third time he interrupted me, and I turned to him and said, okay, why don't you tell me what
the implications are? You're going to take down an American pastime.
Okay, I'll tell you. He said, if 10% of mothers in this country
10%
would begin to perceive football
as dangerous.
A dangerous sport.
This is the reason I'm so pissed off, is this right here. The lie, the blatant lie.
That is the end of football.
If 10% of the mothers believe that their kids are permanently damaging the brains of their children, football is over. Like, over. And that's how big of a deal this is that you're doing. And there's this whole show is going to go on for a long time. I'm going to keep watching it, but I'm kind of jumping ahead. There's actually a football mom who's also a neurologist, and she, a neurosurgeon and neurologist, she becomes involved, and you should hear her talk about it. Yeah.
For the most part, people didn't want to believe
the difference. Okay. That little conversation is the most important part of this to me, because that means, and they later lied before Congress and a bunch of other people, because they wanted to lie to those mothers and parents, and still get them, feeding them new NFL people. Now they had another direction they could have gone. And by the way, I keep saying this. If a mother and a father and a child agree that they don't mind the risk of brain damage to their child, which I think is fucking stupid, but if they think that that's true, that's their right to do that. And I mean, people race cars, for God's sake, right? People take on all kinds of crazy ass risk, but that's informed risk, as you said. It's an informed decision making. The thing that makes this so insidious and evil is that they wanted to lie about the risk so that they could get more people involved, and that they would end up getting damaged. And they did. A bunch of them did. And they covered this shit up. And we're going to find out later. They actually knew all of this, and they covered it up. Because if they had been forthright and they had said, okay, this is a very, very, very dangerous sport, and you're going to potentially make millions of dollars, but you also might die at 30 with brain trauma, right? If they had been forthright, and if they had said that, fine, let's still have it. I mean, we let people smoke, for God's sake, right? We let them smoke. I'm not anti-football, is what I'm saying. I'm anti-lie. And if they had been more authentic with the risk, if they said, look, if you sleep around with 100 people per month, you're going to get, a disease. If you smoke, you're going to die of cancer. If you drink while you're pregnant, you're going to die. They didn't put any warning label on football, and they fought with billions of dollars to keep that warning label off of football. That's what I have a problem with.
They didn't want to admit to themselves or anybody else that our beloved sport, probably our most popular sport, could end up with brain damage. I didn't want to admit it to myself either. It was a hard message, a difficult message, a bad message, but it appeared to be true.
Owners of the 32 teams.
Then in New York, a change in the NFL's top leadership.
The NFL will have a new commissioner. There's a changing of the guard at the National Football League.
In September of 2006, Commissioner Paul Tagliabue stepped down.
Right-hand man to Tagliabue is running the show.
Tagliabue will be succeeded by Roger Goodell.
His second-in-command and closest aide, Roger Goodell, took over. Goodell had grown up in Washington, the son of a United States Senator from New York. Early in his career, he worked as former Commissioner Pete Rozelle's driver.
He basically got his job by writing to the commissioner and saying, please, I'd like to work in the NFL.
It took Goodell 24 years to work his way to the top. He was chief operating officer when the league's scientific committee sent those controversial papers to the journal Neurosurgery.
Here's a guy who spent more than half of his life in the NFL, and more than anyone should be acutely aware of sort of the dangers that are lurking in this problem.
Now, Goodell was fully in charge of the league's handling of the concussion crisis. He soon replaced the rheumatologist, Dr. Elliot Pellman, and promoted the neurologist, Dr. Ira Kassan.
Oh, God. This guy, because he's a neurologist, but he's such a dick. Oh, my God, he's such a dick. You should hear how he talks to the woman who's done more research on this topic than he will ever do in his entire life. You should hear how he talks down to her as a woman. It's
Dr.
just
Ira
so
Kassan,
disgusting.
Who is an expert, but an abrasive
He like
person
mansplains to the woman
who
scientist.
is contemptuous of the arguments that concussion can cause damage.
Kassan had once joined Pellman in attacking Omalo's work. Now, one of Kassan's first moves, a public denial of Omalo's conclusions.
Ira Kassan leads a team of NFL doctors who did a study of several hundred active players and reported that the concern over head injuries is overblown.
Is there any evidence, as far as you're concerned, that links multiple head injuries among pro football players with depression?
60 Minutes.
No.
Dr. Ira Kassan ends up with this sort of very famous exchange that earns him the nickname Dr. No.
With dementia? No. With early onset of Alzheimer's? No.
And Ira Kassan was asked repeatedly, is there any link between trauma, head trauma, and the kind of dementia we're seeing in these players? And he says, no, 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 no.
Is there any evidence as of today that links multiple head
I mean,
injuries with
come on.
long-term?
You don't have to be a neurologist to know
in
that
NFL
smashing
players?
your head
No.
against somebody else at 5 miles an hour is going to hurt your brain.
Then, just 1 month later in Chicago, a dramatic gesture from Commissioner Goodell. At an airport hotel, the league gathered the top NFL brass, team doctors, and
I'm going to eat
trainers.
my NFL snacks.
The NFL convenes a summit in the summer of 2007.
About 200 people are gathered there, and running the show is Ira Kassan. The stakes for the NFL are obvious. It's huge business. If the business is potentially lethal, then that's going to have major implications for the game.
On this day, the commissioner would take a front row seat to listen to the best medical minds in the league.
All the teams are present. All the teams had to send doctors and trainers. And the league's concussion people are there.
They had even invited outside scientists who had become some of the league's biggest critics. But one person was missing.
Dr. Omalu is excluded.
The guy who
Just
leads the whole thing.
underscoring how they don't want to do business with him.
I was not aware of it. Nobody ever told me. Dr. Bales called me and said the NFL is putting together a conference on CTE. That you were not invited.
He is shocked.
I know. It's just like,
I mean, it was
I just can't
allowed,
even
just,
believe it.
No, not you. Yes, you're the guy with all the research. You're the guy who's published the papers. You're the guy who's got the brains. But no, you're not coming.
You're not coming.
Former Steelers
The
team
one
doctor and
voice
neurosurgeon
of
Julian Bales
disagreement.
had become a true believer in CTE and Omalu. They were now research partners. He offered to present Omalu's work to the group.
You got to have the white guy
I
there.
presented and showed our data, which was
The white guy showed the other guy's
4 or
data.
5 cases at that point.
We don't have the voodoo doctor there.
Besides Mike
pieces of
Webster
shit.
and Terry Long, Omalu also found CTE in the brains of Andre Waters and Justin Strelzik. Bales delivered Omalu's message. Playing football could cause permanent brain damage.
It wasn't met with any broad acceptance, to say the least.
Julian Bales got up and talked about Omalu's work. And while he's up there, Kassan is off to the side and he's rolling his eyes. He's clearly distressed by what he's hearing. And that was basically the idea that was conveyed by the NFL in that moment.
There was skepticism.
It
There was
is so hot,
dismissiveness
isn't it?
On his part.
That's good. I'm
There
glad
was
for you,
great
Mommy.
doubt.
It is
As
pretty
Bales
hot.
left the meeting, he ran
As long
into
as
New
people
York
know they're
Times reporter
destroying their
Alan
brains
Schwartz.
when they do it.
I remember Julian being furious, absolutely furious at how they had been treated in that room. And there was
Mommy 242.
clearly
Are you actually the
among
NFL?
the NFL committee,
I bet you
was
might be.
just a very steadfast belief that This is not a problem. You guys don't know how to do research the way we do. And thank you for coming.
I was not the bearer of good news, probably, in many people's minds.
This is a neurologist for the Steelers.
This was not something that I made up. This was.
This is not an anti-football fan. This is not a nerd. This is not a square.
Earlier, Goodell had watched his mentor Tagliabue downplay the concussion controversy. Now he had heard firsthand how serious some respected scientists thought the issue was.
Roger Goodell's on notice. The NFL has a serious issue around the question of concussions, around the issue of brain trauma, on the rising suggestion that there is a link between football and neurodegenerative disease amongst its former players, and that there is a growing body of science that clearly establishes this link.
Outside the conference's closed doors, the new commissioner insisted that the NFL had the problem under control.
The evidence is that our doctors are making excellent decisions. That's proven by the 6-year study that we have and the research that's been done. That
to be fair, I feel like this commissioner of the NFL wanted to do the right thing.
Dr.
I really
Ira
believe
Kasson
that.
Took on the critics.
You're going to see some stuff he does later.
Anecdotes do not make scientifically valid.
This guy is a fucking
I'm a man of
prick.
science. I believe in empirically determined, scientifically valid data, and that is not scientifically valid data.
Kasson insisted there was no evidence that football players were at risk for CTE.
In my opinion, the only scientifically valid evidence of a chronic encephalopathy in athletes is in boxers and in some steeplechase jockeys.
Dr. Kasson declined to be interviewed by Frontline.
This venerable stadium will be a wild scene tonight.
And as the teams took the field just a few months later in the fall of 2007, the league's definitive statement on brain injury was given to every single player in a pamphlet.
The cover says, "What is a concussion?" ? It said, if I get a concussion, am I further at risk for long-term problems? And the answer was, and I'm virtually quoting, research has not shown that there are any long-term consequences to concussions in NFL players as long as each injury is treated properly.
The message was that football was safe to your brain. That was the message. Don't worry about it.
Those conclusions have to be drawn by the medical community.
The commissioner and the league had successfully held the line, denying the dangers of football.
Yeah, but they lose the lawsuit later.
They refused to listen to people who didn't share their opinions about
again, I'm going to give this guy credit. This NFL commissioner.
It was very much
eventually
putting a stake in the ground, saying everybody else is wrong.
But when the commissioner gets good data, he changes. He changes.
Shunned by the league, bruised by the struggle, and looking to make a change, Dr. Amalu left Pittsburgh. He moved to Lodi, California.
He ends up in the Dust Bowl of North Central California.
This early part of the story is all about racism. They didn't believe his findings.
The NFL as anybody could be,
even though he was right 100%, and he gets totally validated by the end.
I wish I never met Mike Webster. CTE has dragged me into the politics of science, the politics of the NFL. You can't go against the NFL. They'll squash you. I really sincerely wished I didn't.
He just is a scientist. He didn't give a shit.
Seriously.
That's how you know he's authentic. He really is like, I don't give a shit about any of this. I don't even know who Mike Webster is. I'm just a good scientist. I'm 100%. You want a geek with no bias to do that study.
Freeman in motion. Wide open. McGee. Touchdown. Gerald Parker.
The brains are precious cargo.
We have to get the brain usually within hours of the death.
You have a brain that's intact. It's been removed from the upper spinal cord.
It is the brain of a former football player.
This as a
oh my God, it's like a brain in a box. Brain
is
delivery.
awe-inspiring
Hello, I got your brain right here. Amazon.
Sense of the word.
I got your brain.
You have the responsibility of actually possessing somebody's
Oh
brain,
my God, that's funny.
which is probably the best representation of who they were. You really treat it with the utmost respect.
This is kind of gross. I'm going to just warn you. If I had a brain
From
right
a
now,
scientific perspective,
you probably could.
There's
on
this
eBay.
secret that's being unlocked.
Oh my God, it's like a brain on ice.
We take it out, we weigh it, we photograph it,
Oh my
all the
God.
external surfaces.
Oh my God, this is so gross. This is why I could never do medical
is
stuff.
so careful.
I told you it was gross. I'm sorry.
This is a person that's being
It's like-
delivered into their care.
That is somebody who just died.
I never forget that the brain is a human being.
That literally just
I
came
feel
out of
very
somebody's head.
privileged
You
that
have one
someone
of those
has
in your head
trusted
right
me
now.
with this duty.
Okay, this chick
In
rocks.
2008, Dr. Ann McKee
she
was a leading
rocks.
Alzheimer's researcher.
This is what I do. I
The
look
leading-
at brains. I'm fascinated by it. I can spend hours doing
This
it.
woman is
In
obsessed
fact, if
with
I
brains.
want to relax, that's one way
She
I can
does.
relax.
This woman chops
Then
up brains
one day,
to relax.
She received a phone call from the Boston University Medical School.
She's so cool. She's so
I called
stinking
her
cool.
and said, "Are you interested in looking at the brains of former
like,
football
"Yes."
players?" And she
It's not that bad. You don't
didn't
think it's that bad?
drop a beat and said, "Are you kidding?"
Give me a brain. Give me that brain. Bring me
I
that
had
brain.
no idea that she was a super football fan.
Big time football fan.
I was born with football. My brothers, my dad. I played football when I was a kid. I mean, it was part of life. It's a part of growing up.
Okay,
It's-
so the two primary scientists who make the conclusions that CTE happens, it's a thing, and it's real, and it happens to football players all the time. The two primary neuroscientists who made the conclusions with that conclusion used thousands of brains, hundreds of brains, and one of them had no idea what football was even about. No bias, no intention to take it down, just was doing his job. Not even from America originally. And the other one is the daughter of like the biggest football fan family you could possibly imagine. It's almost like God sent them to Earth to do this science because they are the perfect representatives of the science.
It's a way of life. So I get it.
Now Dr. McKee was joining a team of researchers to build on Dr. Amalu's discovery.
She's learned a little bit about the work that had previously been done in this issue by Amalu and others, and she's eager to find some brains.
He's eager to
McKee
find
and
some
colleagues
brains.
from Boston University were determined to examine
She also plays a zombie.
as many brains as they could.
Give me those brains. I want more brains. Just give me a brain. I just got delivered a cool brain. I got the coolest new brain. She gets on her smartphone and she tells her friends, "Oh my God, you should see the brain I just got."
And this man knew how to get them.
Chris Nowinski shows up and says, "Look, I'll find the brains for you. I'll bring them to you, and they're going to be football players. Are you interested?" And she says, "Absolutely."
Yes, more brains. Brains. Bring me the brains.
She describes it as
damn.
the greatest collision on Earth for her.
For Nowinski, the issue of CTE is personal.
This is interesting.
He worries he has it.
I'd be a fool
The
not
young
to worry
guy.
about CTE personally, and I took as much brain trauma as anybody.
Young guy kind of fell out of football, went into a professional wrestling career, and the NFL is going to paint him as a money grubber.
I think I have more than enough reason to believe that I'm going to be fighting this myself. I am fighting it.
At Harvard,
Stir
Nowinski was a
zombies.
punishing tackler. He suffered countless head injuries. Then, instead of the NFL, he became a professional wrestler.
Oh yeah. Look at that
He ends up
bod.
with the nickname Chris Harvard, the persona of
Look
this
at
sort
that
of
bod.
snobbish wrestler who's
A
smarter
snobbish
than all
wrestler
the
from
fans.
Harvard.
People should be grateful to have someone of my intelligence in your presence.
For Chris Harvard, the performance often ended with a blow to the head.
Chris Harvard landed on his head quite a bit. As much as wrestling is performance, there's a very, very small margin of error. And especially when you're learning the thing, you fall on your head a lot.
Nowinski began to have violent nightmares and migraine headaches.
Yeah.
So I said, there's something really wrong with me. and the headache didn't go away for 5 years.
Brain trauma became an obsession.
What motivated me every day was the fact that my head was killing me, and I knew that I felt
no
awful,
helmet in wrestling.
I wasn't the only person.
No,
but I was a person in a position.
Again. Okay. I am not agreeing that we should get rid of pro wrestling. I don't particularly like it. I think it's really funny and everything. Look, if you're going to get involved with pro wrestling and you're going to destroy your brain and you are going to make $1 million, you're going to take a chance at being The Rock, or if you're going to pump steroids your whole life and become Arnold and then deny it, or if you're going to win, the Tour de France, 7 times in a row and then come up later and have a really apologetic, oh yeah, I was doping the whole fucking time, Lance Armstrong. If you want to be that person, that's fine. I'm okay with people being frauds. I'm okay with people lying their ass off. I'm okay with people sacrificing their health for money if that's what they choose. What I'm not okay with is lying about it and telling other people that they should do it too and causing harm to society and to other people, and because you were inauthentic and you hid the truth. I'm not okay with that.
To make a difference.
He would take on the task of finding brains of former football players for Dr. McKee.
Boxing. Look, if you want to do boxing, fine. I used to do martial arts. My buddy, it's a true story, a little fun true story here. It involves a testicle that swelled the size of an orange. So listen up. So I did sort of mixed martial arts with something called Kung Kwon Do in 1987, I want to say. And me and my friend Bobby Martinez, which I probably shouldn't dox him, but he's not around. He doesn't Twitch him or anything. One of my best friends of all time. Absolutely, jacked, amazing little guy. He was about 5 inches shorter than me, but he could kick my ass anytime. Brilliant artist. He actually went on into an art career. A really good friend of mine. And he was 4 brothers. He was the youngest. He was the second to the youngest of 4 brothers, and raised by a single mom, and in poverty. And but he and I, we signed up for this kung fu class, and we were both pretty big nerds and stuff. But he was not as much of a nerd as I was, and he was very muscular, actually. Anyway, and we would do martial arts, and we found this guy who was recommended by his big brother, and we went to him. And all my major injuries have come from martial arts, all of them. And there's another injury I had in my shoulder, which I still suffer from right now. I got dropped on my head. Anyway, so we would do this Kung Kwon Do, and we were told we were supposed to wear cups. Cup is right. Cup is this plastic thing that goes between your legs in a jock strap to keep your privates safe. And if you don't wear a cup, if you don't wear a cup in martial arts, any martial art, you're just asking to die. Asking to get really bad. So we were sparring, and everybody was sparring, and he got up to spar with some other person. I don't remember who it was during our class. And, we would put the gloves on and everything. It was like full contact sparring. Are they metal now? Damn. I didn't know that. I did not know that. So, for martial arts, you got to understand when you're sparring in martial arts, you full contact, you're hitting them at full force. You just are depending on the gloves, whether they're Kempo gloves or whatever, and you usually have a helmet on. You got your teeth in and everything, and then you got your cup to protect you down there. And striking the groin is a very, very regular hit. The kicks and knees. I was going to say, yeah. The taking a knee, as this person Tankum Heim is saying, if you're doing martial arts, if you're doing full contact martial arts, you're getting full force knees and kicks right to the groin, and that stuff will destroy your junk. And I know this because Bobby went up there and he was sparring with this other person, and they didn't even hit him hard. They gave him this. I think it was a girl actually. And I can't remember the story. I slightly remember it being a girl, though. And he had a full contact in the groin, and he went down hard. He went down really hard, and the guy came over, and he was like, "What, you don't have a cup on? What the hell?" And they called the ER. The ambulance came and got him, took him to the hospital. But it's not below the belt. That's martial arts. That's completely fair, and you're expected to, do the whole thing. I mean, the neck is another target. I don't know what the deal is with the neck. We didn't usually go for the neck, but the neck is a really valid target in martial arts, especially karate. So, anyway, they carted him off to the hospital because they weeded out. They got weeded out of the rules, unified rules. I did not know that. See, I've been out of the martial arts game for a long time. But when I was in high school, I was really into it. Actually, junior high. When I was in junior high, and I actually credit martial arts for a lot of things. It gave me a lot of confidence. It made me feel safe, even though it's kind of you don't really need martial arts to feel safe. It was a camaraderie there. I used to really love going there with my friends. I liked sitting there and watching people spar. I liked the adrenaline that would run when you were sparring against somebody. I just really love it. I kind of miss it, actually. There's something very real about that. And I took many blows to the head. I mean, I'm sure that if I had kept doing it, I might have been at risk for encephalopathy because even with the helmet and, your padding and everything, you're still going to get those microtraumas. The science is very clear on that. But this poor guy, they sent him to the hospital, and he told us a story after he was in the hospital for like 4 days. And he told us a story about having a nurse who had to check on him and stuff. He had to have people check on him down there, and go to, it's so embarrassing. And we were in junior high and high school, so we gave him shit about that for the rest of his life. Because he lost a testicle. I think he lost it, actually. Yeah, I don't remember for sure, but I'm pretty sure he did. And we used to give him shit about that. We'd give him nicknames and all kinds of stuff. It's just because, after he got over it, we were so sad when it happened. We were like terrified for him. Because but he used to joke. He'd say, "Yeah, my testicle like swelled up to the size of like an orange and a half or something," because it completely crushed it. It completely crushed his testicle. There's like nothing left, and so they had to figure something out. So, the moral of the story is, wear, according to Tankenheimer, a steel cup if you're going to do mixed martial arts. Don't screw around with that shit. And if you're going to spar, you're going to have chronic encephalopathy if you do it too much. I don't know what the appropriate amount is. I don't think we should cancel NFL. I don't think we should cancel football. I don't think we should cancel that. I think we need to figure out a way to do it safer. And they redid helmets. You're going to find out later in this documentary. They redid everything based on the science. But they still had to admit that even with the best possible helmet, you're still going to have it. And so again, I'm not against football. I'm not against martial arts and boxing and all that. I'm not against it. I am pro disclosure. So if you know you're going to do it, then you know what you're getting into. But they don't have that.
They call him the designated brain chaser. Like that's his job, to go out and get the brains.
You thought it was only legal in a couple states.
Nowinski made the hard calls, asking families to donate the brain of a deceased loved one.
At the beginning, when I first kind of got up the nerve to do it, I wrote down a script and I prepared and I practiced mentally preparing myself for wandering into someone's life like this.
I just this is the thing. I don't know that it's worth the risk, given all of the other things you can do in life, and especially your brain.
Almost right away, Nowinski secured a portion of the brain of a 45-year-old former Tampa Bay Buccaneer, Tom McHale.
Tom McHale was a brilliant guy, went to Cornell, had been playing football since a kid. His brilliance intellectually was matched by being an incredible athlete.
See, this is the story. These are the stories that just make me really wince. The ones where the guy had an amazing brain and complete spaghetti by the end of it.
Tom and Lisa McHale had 3 sons. Once his career was over, McHale ran a successful chain of restaurants. But then, uncharacteristically, trouble.
Restlessness, irritability, and discontent describe Tom to a T today, but no way is it anywhere near the man I had known and the man I had been married to for years.
The thing that's so hard about this is that these men were probably prone to those feelings after their, prolific careers as a football player. Even if they hadn't had CTE, they probably would have been fighting the glory days depression like I do, right? Like we all do. They probably would have already been dealing with the depression of getting old. I'm getting old and I have this 40-pound gut and I'm on my bike and I'm trying to burn off my gut. And it's depressing and I don't have CTE though. So the thing that is sort of insidious about this is that these men, in this particular case men, they're going through the same emotional states that they would go through already at that age. Do you know what I'm saying? But the difference is that it's all getting compounded because they also have CTE. And it makes it impossible to believe them because people looking at them are like, oh, it's just yet another old guy going through a midlife crisis because his glory days are over. And so the complications from CTE, this happens with PTSD with veterans too sometimes, but the complications from midlife, the normal midlife things, I can't imagine what it would have been like to be one of these guys. They have chronic CTE and they're also just fighting regular depression. So how would they even know in their head what thing is coming because of the disease and what thing is coming because they're just dwelling on their glory days? It must have been an entire psychological just soup in their head because they're trying to distinguish, well, what is a legitimate, I just need to pull myself up by my bootstraps and, buck up camper and, go out for a bike ride and get outdoors and stay happy again. All those normal things that I'm doing now. I don't have CTE, but I can say those things. Those are the things, because you're going to have these anyway. And how to distinguish it from their disease. It's a legitimate disease. And eventually this guy, it's very sad to say, he loses the battle to depression because the normal things that would already beset him in midlife are now 1,000 times worse because of his CTE.
Change was so diabolical. He became a drug addict. He became depressed. He became, had irate moments of, violent temper.
McHale's addictions spiraled out of control. Painkillers, cocaine.
I remember so clearly him looking at me, and this is going back, in the final months of his life, and saying, Lisa, when I look in your eyes, all I see is disappointment. And I honestly don't know whether he was seeing my disappointment or whether it was his own disappointment that he was seeing reflected back. But it pains me to think of how much that hurt him.
A former Tampa Bay Buccaneer was found dead this morning.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers player was.
He had died of an overdose. Dr.
This is the thing, is that this CTE makes them more susceptible to addictions, but then they end up dying to the addictions and everybody just looks the other way. They're like, well, another addict football player is dead. Oh, well, that's a real sad tragedy.
He had
but they don't. And then anybody who says, well, it was the football that killed him, they become a conspiracy theorist, right?
Dr. Amala's research. But she
variable steroids, yeah, and mental health as well. Absolutely. The steroids, yeah, particularly if you're a biker, right? I'm so glad I never did blood doping or any of that stuff as a kid. The most drugs I ever did for performance-enhancing drugs was I would take 3 ibuprofen before triathlon. And it actually works. I'm not saying to do it, because it also thins your blood. So if you have any accidents during that, you probably bleed to death.
See for herself.
We dissect and section his brain, do a whole series of microscopic slides, look at it with all sorts of different stains for different things, and then come to a conclusion about what the diagnosis is.
What she saw was that telltale protein, tau.
This is a 45-year-old with terrific disease. I mean, he had florid disease. He has tau in all these regions of his brain. He was having some problems with...
Dr. McKee had examined thousands of brains, but the location of the damage from CTE was different.
I remember my feeling. I was scared. I was really
That's
scared.
Nice.
It really was a turning point. It was a new understanding.
I probably should rewatch all of House, actually. I'm glad you said that, because I had never got through House. It's a new thing I can watch on TV.
Dr. McKee soon had 3 brains.
On my computer.
All with CTE. But rather than just publish in scientific journals, Chris Nowinski was determined to get the word out.
Nowinski, who is not a scientist, says there are people getting hit here. If we speak up now, we may be able to, if not save lives.
This next series makes me sick to my stomach. But nobody would listen to the woman or the voodoo doctor. But as soon as they get a white former NFL athlete who's not a scientist to represent them, white dude, they listen to the white dude. So the white dude is like literally, bulldozing away for these other scientists that would otherwise be ignored.
At least prevent the damage that we are seeing on Ann McKee's table.
What's that? Cool to see a PhD point of view to CTE. I watch a UFC champion stream, and he talks about CTE from an athlete's point of view. Really? Really? I am super interested. Stinkenheimer, thank you for being here. I actually think UFC stuff is pretty awesome, actually. As a part of me, I'm kind of too old for it now. I'm more of a yoga kind of guy. Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I'll have to watch that. I actually really, really loved martial arts in my high school days. And I did a lot of skateboarding and stuff like that. And I know. And So there's a part of me that really wishes the UFC was around when I was young. I think I could, I can't do it now. Who am I kidding? I can't. I got too much writing on it. Just biking and longboarding is already a risk.
Nowinski decided to take on the NFL in a very public way at their biggest event, the 2009 Super Bowl.
This is why somebody asked why I'm showing this documentary on Super Bowl Sunday. This is why.
The glitz and glamour of the NFL production machine was in full gear, developed over decades, highly choreographed. A national event with a carefully crafted story.
Wow. Oh, Jens, I know Jens. I think I know Jens.
In Tampa,
yeah,
the big game, Nowinski and
I love rock and roll.
Crash the
I
festivities.
Do. Absolutely
by holding
do.
a press conference.
I like all music.
This is the genius of Nowinski, really. I mean, right? I mean, we're going to present her findings.
This is something you would never should see.
Where do we want to announce that? Oh, let's go to Tampa Bay, where the Super Bowl is about to play out, where there's 4,000 media members who are there waiting to watch.
I've examined thousands of brains.
Look at this. Look at this. Look at all the reporters who show up. And this guy right here, there's the dick. There's the asshole. There's the asshole. No, there's no damage. There's no damage. There's no damage whatsoever when two helmets clash. None whatsoever. No long-term damage.
And this is not a normal part of aging. This is not something you normally see in the brain.
They were saying football caused this. This is an issue. I think McKee uses the word crisis. She says this is a crisis.
I haven't heard that yet.
And anybody who doesn't believe it is in denial.
Yeah.
Also on the panel, Nowinski's other star, Lisa McHale.
8 months ago, I lost my best friend, my college sweetheart, and my husband of 18 years.
Lisa McHale had decided to go public with her husband's story.
Yeah.
I never hesitated to be public with Tom's findings because I was so fully blown away.
You know what I don't. I'm already hearing the end here. The NFL comes after these people who have lost spouses and calls them money grubbers.
To know that Tom could have had.
And you know what I hate to admit, there might be some level of subconscious money grubbing going on. Well, wait till you hear about the lawsuit coming up. Everybody came out of the woodwork. All of a sudden, all of these football people, Mike Ditka, everybody, they're like, oh, there's a class action lawsuit. Yeah, I'm retired. I need money. Let's do it. And you got to ask yourself, this is why this is a very complicated issue. You know, it's like some of these people don't even know probably the subconscious level of money grubbing that was going on. But they're also dealing with extreme grief, and they want to find an excuse. They don't want to believe that they were a bad person that caused their husband to become an addict. There's a million. It's extremely complicated.
The kind of injury he had to his brain and that it could have been caused by football. And I said, my God, of course, this is information that I would have liked to have had.
And after her husband's death, McHale decided to become an advocate for Dr. McKee's research.
He is now the 6th confirmed case of CTE among former NFL players. And bearing in mind that only 6 former NFL players
have ever been tested,
examined for CTE.
Yeah.
I find these
because they
results
couldn't see the brains.
not only incredibly significant. But
Don't worry though. Don't worry though. After this, the brains start coming in. More brains.
Disturbing.
More brains. And that's when it gets really terrifying.
There were few reporters listening.
Look at them.
There were thousands of reporters across the street.
And nearly every major sport, there's an errant disregard for injury. I think the rules need to change, and I think you guys are gonna laugh, but I think touch football. I wish people. Americans' thirst for violence is so strong that touch football. I'll be long gone and dead before any American Super Bowl is ever touch. Touch football is hard. Touch football takes an incredible amount of coordination. There's still a certain amount of risk, but no more than playing European football, right? European soccer, football. And I mean, because there's occasional head bout. The Pro Bowl was a flag football game. Was it really? Was it? The Pro Bowl was flag? I didn't know that. Mark, I would love to hear more about that because that's something I could get behind. Flag football is fucking hard. You know what else is hard? Ultimate. If you've ever played Ultimate Frisbee, it is really, really hard. The first time this year they did a touch. Damn. Mark, thank you for sharing that because I don't want to see football go away. I think football is an amazing sport. I love it. I used to play Turkey Bowl all the time and we would play flag and we would have a blast with it. And we'd get hurt. I mean, football has tons of injuries related to it, just like mountain biking or surfing or anything, right? But they're not repetitive, recurring, head trauma. And so I think that's one of the, actually Adam Ruins Football, that's one of the things they recommended at the end is that somehow we change the stigma and we make it okay. I mean, there was a time when people didn't even wear helmets. Helmets were for pussies. And then we started to wear helmets like, okay, if you look back at the 50s or whatever, you look back at the original stuff, the first vinyl cotton padded helmets that they wore, and they've made them wear them I'm not wearing a fucking helmet. And then you still have rugby, right? You still have rugby out there. Strangely, rugby is probably not as dangerous. I don't know. That's a tough one.
And probably 2 dozen
willing
to walk across.
Yeah.
And learn about
it doesn't have to mean that.
That was the
right?
shocking part.
That's the thing. If we can change slowly, if we can change the idea that you're not a pussy if you wear a teeth guard or, you wear a helmet or you move, then we can still have all the amazing athleticism from it that I love, that I really love. I wish I could. I mean, there's nothing like catching a really great long bomb pass in football. Out there in a turkey bowl, playing with your buddies. We used to do a turkey bowl at church every year. And I always went into it kind of begrudgingly, okay. And I would get out there, and by the end of it, I was all muddy, and I was just having a fucking blast. It was so fun. In fact, I still have fond memories of that because I was out there with my buddies and people that I knew from church, and some of the scouts that I had helped kind of grow up and stuff, and we were out there just and we didn't tackle. It was a fantastic thing. So I'm not anti-football. There.
Here we were in the midst of everything, and this potentially giant story.
We died like real men. No
being
seatbelt.
Told, and virtually no one was there.
Pays for 10 years. He had no pension.
Nowinski's press conference was no match for the show the NFL was putting on across town.
I mean, we're all sweating and we're drinking our sports drink and
Then, one of the most watched television broadcasts in history. A 30-second ad sold for $3 million.
$3 million.
It was the crowning event for a year in which the NFL earned almost $8 billion.
$8 billion. To put that in perspective, Nike makes $3 billion a year. At least they did in the 90s when I worked there.
Massive force financially.
What does Microsoft bring in per year? I think Amazon was $20 billion, but they don't make any profit, actually. I don't know. It's hard to say.
The Super Bowl is a spectacle. TV is paying huge money to televise the sport.
Gets it away quickly and finds the tight end over the middle, and that's Heath Miller.
The NFL has broadcast over 5 networks. ESPN, where we work, their new contract with the NFL is worth almost $2 billion a year. So they're basically paying around $120 million per game.
Look at that hit. It's so cool.
That's like the budget of a Harry Potter
It's
movie.
so cool.
Every week, week in, week out.
Oh, my God. And seriously, this is the thing about it is the athleticism is just so amazing.
Super Bowl.
Ladies and gentlemen, here to present the Vince Lombardi Trophy, the Commissioner of the National Football League, Roger Goodell.
Well, some said that we could not top last year's Super Bowl, but the Steelers and Cardinals did that tonight.
Presiding over it all, the most powerful man in sports.
ESPN owns UCF now? I did not know that.
Congratulations on your 6th World Championship.
He sat atop a multi-billion-dollar empire that he was determined to protect.
Yeah.
One of his mantras was to protect the shield, the NFL shield, to protect the integrity of the game.
But now the league might face huge lawsuits and a tarnished image if Dr. McKee's findings about CTE held up. Not long after her trip to Tampa, Dr. McKee received a phone call.
I was called by Ira Casson, and I remember thinking, why is Ira Casson calling me?
She's intimidated from the start because she knew
Know
enough
him. He looks
about
up to him.
Ira Casson, she said, to know that he wasn't necessarily a friend.
And he wanted me to come to the NFL office and present the data.
And that was their internal
That May,
study. That was their
McKee
internal
and
study.
Lewinsky arrived at NFL headquarters.
Really?
We head on up to a very, very fancy
Oh, wow.